Hi, welcome back to part two of my older adult interview presentation, part two. So, just picking up where we left off. Um, I was finishing discussing kind of the crisis of being too intimate that my grandma was experiencing and kind of how that played out in her life. And now on this slide, I wanted to talk about kind of the things that aided to why she became so intimate in her young adulthood. And some things were that she was in a Jewish community where everyone kind of knew each other that aided to her friendliness. So it kind of made it very easy to be intimate with others. It was kind of expected that that's how she would behave with everyone. Also, gender wise, as a woman, she was expected to be able to be a good wife and to be able to be a good hostess and you know be respectful and super nice to everyone. So, as a society, that's kind of an expectation that was placed upon her for just being a woman. And her family was a part of the middle class, so they were moderately well off in regards to the socioeconomic. There was very little stress, so she was kind of free to do whatever she wanted. And even in our interview, she quoted that she had a very good life, and she had a life that she wanted to live. It was completely up to her. She made every decision. She had the freedom to make every decision. It's not that she was like in a poor family and didn't have those resources. Being in the middle class, she was able to make basically any decision, and it came easy and naturally to her. She did go to college and pursue some of her educational goals, but my grandpa was kind of the breadwinner, so she went to college just to go to college. There was no expectation that she would have to do anything with it after she graduated college. She just did it to say, not necessarily to say she did it, but just to um, expand because she was a very smart young individual and she wanted to expand on her education and she had a lot of curiosities, but there was no pressure to actually apply it back into the workforce. So that's something that she did not have to experience that I think played into her intimacy with others in regards to friendships and relationships and friendships with people around the neighborhood. It made it very easy for her. Some impressions that she did face was, I believe she had some internalized superiority where she was unaware of her privileges. Definitely, she had white privilege, and in doing so, I don't think she really knew what her power was or how easy it came about. And in turn, I think that kind of didn't educate her as much as it could have for people who face bigger issues. She was financially dependent on her husband, so in regards to um, being intimate versus isolated, I think that she felt very just dependent on whatever my grandpa wanted to do, and it kind of fell onto his court. So even though she was intimate and had a good relationship, I don't know if she really had that good sense of self because she couldn't make a lot of the decisions. She was unable to have a job, very little work skills, and was expected to be the homemaker. She was not well prepared for college. She didn't have the best grades in high school, or she had the best grades in high school and then went to college. Everyone kind of outshined her, and that she put that in her words. Um, and so going to college, she realized that she maybe wasn't as, smart as she thought. Something that kind of aided to her intimacy is that she was alone with being a Jewish kid growing up until about the sixth or seventh grade. And then until then, when she had that, it was kind of this confident boost that she had more people like her. My grandpa was poor to start off with and had to pay for his own college, so that goes back into what I've already discussed about her feeling isolated when my grandpa was off at college or working because he did have to support himself. And at the time, couples didn't really live together unless they were married. In college, they went to different colleges, so it was like she did have that intimate bond, but then when they went off to and did their own thing, she did feel really isolated because she didn't have my grandpa there with her all the time. Um, as far as her familial influences, her parents constantly encouraged her growing up to get into a relationship. It was kind of their expectation that she'd be married young, or at least met her husband young. My grandma quoted that it ran in the family to marry young. Her parents got together at the age 13. My grandma and grandpa got together at the age 15. So, and so on back in my ancestors and so on, that everyone kind of met each other pretty young. So that was the status, they didn't know any better, that they thought that's how it was going to happen. So in a family perspective, she was really encouraged to be intimate at an early age and was taught those skills on a good, stable relationship very, very early on. From her community didn't really agree with early relationships, but they had strong boundaries in regards to no premarital sex. I think her community really gave um, a lot of influences in regards to what not to do in a relationship, but not necessarily how to have a strong relationship. In regards to institutions, my grandma told me that everyone was in relationships and it was the status quo to be in a relationship, so you're kind of the oddball one out if you were not. And that was grade school all the way up through college. As a larger social policy, it was widely accepted for women to become homemakers, and that was kind of the role that they were going to be getting ready for. And that started, according to my grandma, at a really young age, and what we would call preschool, where the girls go and they get with the dresses and they're in the kitchen and they're taking care of the babies. I think it was something ingrained in them from such an early age that they didn't know any better, whereas nowadays there is kind of a lot of freedom in regards to what your society puts on you. But in her time, society did not have that, and it was one way that you were going to get married early and start having kids. Very different than waiting till like your 30s, which we're seeing in 2018. A different social theory that I applied to my grandma's life was the social learning theory by Albert Bandura. He in the book that we're reading by Anissa Rogers, it said that people are active agents in their own learning, and that people know what they're doing as they're learning, and that's kind of what shapes their experiences. They also said that it had two different models of modeling, where we learn behaviors by watching how others do things, and I think that's really prevalent with my grandma, and growing up knowing people get in strong relationships early on and having strong intimate bonds. Growing up, that was modeled to her, and that was kind of a way that she had to live her life because that was what was modeled to her. From an early age. And self-efficacy from people's expectations that they can perform a task successfully. I did find all this information on page 95 in case you wanted to learn more about it. But the self-efficacy, it's more so about how people think that they're going to perform on a task, and that really relates to the success of them doing that. I think this is also prevalent in my grandma's relationships in her young adulthood in regards to intimacy versus isolation. She never even entertained the idea of isolation. It was always she was going to get into a relationship, get married, start having kids, start being a homemaker from the time that she was born. That was something that was ingrained in her. So I also think that her idea on her own success was pretty high because she didn't see any other different way to live her young adulthood without having someone like my grandpa in her life. Some of the limitations I found with social learning theory was that it fails to address the innate cognitive processes that may be motivating people's behaviors. It also emphasizes what happens versus what the person did with what happened. So I think that this theory really overlooks like the ideas that my grandma did feel isolated when her and my grandpa were not completely together. And they were all each at their, different colleges, and outcomes for every individual may be different. So what is a reward to one person might be different to another. So it's really hard to keep it consistent with social learning theory. And it does not necessarily explain all behaviors of the variations of one's behavior. So there is a lot of room for error with this, in taking a look at this. These were some of the references that I used. Definitely our textbook from Anissa Rogers, and then this great journal that explained kind of the early socioeconomic adversities and how it plays out into people's lives. That was a journal that I took a look at. So thank you so much. It was great sharing kind of a little bit about my grandma and more about her life and dissecting a little bit some of it. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in, and see you guys soon. Thanks so much. Bye.